Welcome to our panel discussion. Super excited to have these amazing group of panelists with us today. Let me give you some introductions. First of all, I'd like to introduce Kristen Carley of Camelback Nutrition. You just saw Kristen. You just met her, and she delivers a lot of terrific content on Instagram. So Kristen, thank you for joining us. Libby Mills, she's a registered dietitian, nutritionist of Libby Mills Nutrition, and the host of this really fun radio show and podcast called Libby's Luncheonette. We also have Kelly Jones joining us, who's a specialist in sports dietetics and the owner of Kelly Jones Nutrition. She's a media spokesperson who focuses on plant-forward nutrition, and she's been featured in everything from the Washington Post to Women's Health. And we're hoping, we aren't sure, we're trying to also bring in Ray Molumby, a sweet potato farm girl, who has a terrific Instagram and TikTok pages from @HarvestJoy. And she just focuses on how food is grown with lots of tips and tricks and inspiration. But she's like literally mobile, so we're trying to get her from the road. So we're hoping we can bring in Ray. Oh, there she is. I just was introducing you, Ray. So just in the nick of time, perfect timing.
Hello. My hair's like a mess. I've been pulling out my hair trying to get in. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. That was literally right on cue. Okay.
Oh, good.
So,
I meant that.
Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And I guess the thing that I just want to talk about or just mention in sort of opening remarks is that, the conversation around all forms, meaning canned, fresh, frozen, dried, 100% juice, that's really changing. And thanks to all of you and, these kinds of gatherings that Pacific Coast Producer does and other folks that are out there just really talking about the all forms message. But I want to actually begin today's panel with maybe just hearing from a couple of our panelists about strategy. I mean, all of you know that we have been hit really hard lately by inflation, and food costs are just going, sky high. And so, Kristen, I think I'm going to go ahead and toss this to you first, but I'm wondering, how do you think canned fruits and tomatoes can really help us, have our grocery dollars go further?
Yeah, of course. Well, cans are incredibly affordable, So, just at my local Walmart, canned tomatoes go for around 50 cents a can. So we're talking really, really affordable. And so I think that, anybody should be stocking up on these things. I think also, besides the actual price point, they have a very long shelf life, which is very helpful when, you're a busy parent like me, and sometimes you make plans and plans change, and then you've got to quickly adapt. And so, fresh produce is great, and we eat a lot of it in our house, but canned produce can be awesome for, last minute changes. And also every meal that I tend to cook, in a week, I will always have canned tomatoes. So it's great because of that long shelf life, but also just really, really affordable.
No, that's a terrific answer. Kelly, what do you say about how canned tomatoes and fruits can help our grocery dollars go a bit further?
Yeah, I echo what Kristen said. I am also a mom, but I also work with a lot of families. I have a lot of families in my audience, and in addition to families, student athletes. So cost is incredibly important to them. And, when we're talking about stretching your dollar further, we want to think about nutrient density. And it's not just that they're, cheap, but I don't want to say cheap, but not only that they're cost effective, but they're packing in a lot of nutrition. So it goes past what even you're seeing on the nutrition facts panel and bang for your buck. It's not just vitamins and minerals. It's not just fiber, which people think it's going to make me more regular. We know there's so many microbiome and immune system benefits there. And then there's also the antioxidants that aren't even listed on the nutrition facts panel. And just, I think, research that continues to emerge in the field of nutrition related to anything and everything talks about the importance of antioxidants, variety in antioxidants, getting them on a daily basis, whether we're talking about disease prevention and management, or immune system benefits, or again, like a lot of my audience, just thinking about athletic performance and mental performance. So, you know, it goes past what you're seeing on that nutrition facts panel when we talk about really what you're getting there. And when we're thinking about, you know, families that might overbuy on fresh, you know, Kristen already mentioned this too, but it's going to last a lot longer in your pantry. So we want to think about the fact that instead of overbuying with wishful thinking and then having to throw it away later and literally throw money in the trash, you know, we can plan a little bit better to have those fresh items and then have the canned available, those nutritious pantry items available to pull out when we need them. And then for those that are of lower income, we have to consider them too. They might be avoiding the fresh produce section altogether and just have this idea that produce is too expensive. So, you know, leading them that way in the aisles so that they can, you know, marry those nutrient dense foods with the energy dense ones that they're looking for when they're really trying to stretch their dollar, and then inflation adds on to it all too. Oh, Ginny, you're muted.
I think those are really good points, and you're absolutely right about the nutrition panels not having everything. And we have found that with studies that we have done with tomatoes and apricots and peaches. I mean, some key nutrients actually bump up thanks to the canning process, and there's no accounting for that on the nutrition panel. So that excellent information. Okay, Libby and Ray, and Libby, I'll start with you. For our next question, in your social media posts, interviews, client consulting, what's the response or interaction been when you've suggested incorporating canned? Are you getting pushback? And you know, how do you speak to that?
Great question. And while you might think that I need to defend canned food, in my conversations with clients, with consumers, I find that people really just need to be reminded of the value of canned food. Look, you know, if you opened up any pantry door across anyone in the United States, you're going to find that they do have canned food. But it's not the first thing that people think of when they think of eating peaches, pears, or even cooking with tomatoes. In fact, they really just simply have sometimes just forget that the canned food is there, which is kind of one of the most beautiful things about canned food. It's good past the best buy date. So it lasts a lot longer than perhaps buying, well, definitely than buying fresh. And as we saw through the pandemic with supply chain issues, the disaster like Hurricane Ian, canned food is always there and it's always safe to eat. People need to be reminded that canned food saves time. Today, people are so busy that they honestly just they're just not aware that they already have canned food that's prepped and ready to eat or heat. And this is just like having a magic chef in your pantry who's helping you prepare quick, easy, delicious, and nutritious meals. I mean, I love reminding people that canned food is real food, and people can be confident eating canned food because it is nutritious, and they should feel confident about that. The canning process is very similar to what their or our grandparents did to preserve food, and in many ways, it's safer. And these are things that I like to remind people of. In addition, canned fruits, they can be served right from the can. They can be used as an ingredient. I mean, again, people know this. They just need to be reminded that if you want something that's affordable, you want to prevent food waste, canned fruit is definitely the way to go. And it sure beats the heck out of finding that rotten piece of fruit at the bottom of the fridge, you know, that then you have to throw away. That's just throwing money out the door.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so it's just fun to remind people of all the great benefits of canned food. And I look at my job as reminding people and making sure that Americans are stocked up on their canned food, that they're empowered with easy, quick canned food ideas, and they're never without a nutritious foods to make into a meal.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you. And Ray, I know that you you could come from a grower background and spend a lot of time with growers. I'm just kind of curious what your interaction has been, whether it's on social media posts or others, when you talk about canned.
Yeah, that's a great question. So with fresh produce, of course, I love talking about fresh produce, but I love talking about all aspects, and where that produce ends up is being canned. Um, and you asked about, what's the response that I get when I push canned food. And it's been really great, actually. I did a TikTok where I said, don't waste tomato paste. And I put the tomato paste on this wax paper and then folded it all up and then put it in the freezer. And I was really curious at the time, like, what are people going to think about this? And some people said, this is exactly what I was looking for. Or, this is great if food supply is low in stores. Or there was one that was like, or you could just buy a new can. So I think that people are open to it because they are trying to save money, but I've had a really great response. And I haven't had to defend it too much.
No, that's terrific. And I think, Libby's point about, just reminding people that it's there, and then also like really fun hacks. And so people, because it's true. I mean, we make pizzas all of the time, and we'll often just use tomato sauce right out of the can because it's simple and delicious, but then we have extra. So then we'll freeze it, and then, we'll use it next time. So no, those are great tips. Well, I actually want to hear from all four of you about your success stories or best practices that you found when talking about canned, because that way our viewers will have tips that they can use in their practices. And so we'll just kind of go around, and Kelly, we'll start with you, if that's okay. I'm just curious, what you're doing.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted still. So yeah, I think that it's really important, a couple of things. First, to hit people with their emotions a little bit. I think that's where we get people to react and start listening. So, again, for my audience that tends to be more families and student athletes, they value time and money more than anything. So we talked about the money a little bit, but time is of such great value to most people. I think the pandemic taught us to value time even more. And so, when it comes to saving time, and it comes to, stretching your dollar, that gets people excited, and they want to listen and they want to learn. So I've found a lot of success, no matter what I'm communicating, and finding a way to relate to and connect to the person. And then once you have your attention, then you can dive in and say, okay, now that I have your attention, here's why this is beneficial. And that can get them to actually start purchasing it and get it in their homes. I also think that, Libby already said, reminding people. I think that as health and nutrition and food professionals, the more that we talk about benefits of canned in all forms, the more people are going to, again, buy it on repeat, the more that we'll start having conversations about, okay, now how do we use it? Because it's in your house. Now, what do you do? Which is kind of what, Katie and Wendy were speaking to earlier, like have a plant with tacos. It's Taco Tuesday, and I will always have canned tomatoes as a part of my tacos because it's just easy. So, showing people, finding, the emotional connection, making sure we're all working together to repeat the information, and then, show them ways to do it once we've gotten that attention a little bit further. So that's kind of where I go with it.
Great. Kristen, all of you go ahead.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I think reliability is something that I like to stress a lot. The fruit or the tomatoes are always ripe when they're in the can, which is helpful in terms of time, like Kelly was saying. The other thing is that they're peeled. If anybody knows me and me in the kitchen, I don't peel things. I will never sit there and peel anything. Peaches, pears, potatoes, nothing. Like nothing gets peeled. If I have to peel it, I won't do it. So again, this is already ready. And so it just makes life easier. The shelf life that we talked about, how affordable it is, we talked about, and especially in the case of tomatoes, like how incredibly versatile they are and how you can really use them in everything. And I do a lot in my house. And then I find that a lot of people don't know about the increased nutrition, like in the case of lycopene, like you were talking about, Ginny. a lot of people don't know that. They assume, if anything, they assume that it's degraded. And so mentioning that, and like Kelly said, just like repeating our messaging over and over and over to make sure that everyone in our audience hears it is really the strategy there.
No, that's really, yeah, no, that's really, really great. And that's also, I didn't know that about you, that fun fact about not peeling anything. I should have had that in my intro. Okay, Libby, best practices or success stories for you?
Sure. I like to engage my audience with questions. So whether it's on air or perhaps even with a social media post, but especially my clients, and I ask them those questions that begin engaging them into reassessing how they're spending their time and money. So for example, how often do you need to go to the store, but really just don't have time to get there? Or how often are you spending time, like you said, peeling and cutting tomatoes? And just leading them in with these questions after they have a chance to answer and think about it, it opens up the lid to highlighting how canned food can be, how it is ready to eat and heat, how it's shelf stable and good after the best by date, and how it's available when you can't get to the store. And it really is waste free when you include the fact that the can be recycled. And then just spending some time sharing creative ways to incorporate canned foods, such as opening a can of peaches, cutting them up and adding them to your morning cereal or oatmeal, or using canned tomatoes to make a quick soup or sauce, or just open them up and use it for dipping tortilla chips, as in the case with the fire roasted canned tomatoes.
Absolutely great. And Ray, I love your tomato paste success story, but do you have any other best practices or success stories that you have found just with your social media posts that you want to share?
Absolutely. So of course you can share tips on, how to store that canned produce once you open it. That's super helpful. But also what I really like to talk about is also the growing side. So what folks might not know is that farmers do grow specific varieties for different things. So the restaurant industry has a certain variety of tomatoes that they use. There's a different variety for canned tomatoes versus the ripe tomatoes you find in the fresh produce department. So that's going to create a totally different flavor than if they were to buy the fresh produce themselves and can it. And I'll tell you how hard that is. It's like, I made this homemade tomato sauce and I tried to make it taste just as good as canned. And my husband was like, I just don't understand why you didn't buy canned tomatoes. And I'm like, well, great. That's like 2 hours of my time I just wasted. But really just, that message. And also canned produce is picked when it is at its most ripe picking point. And for fresh produce, they pick it way, not way in advance, but they pick it in advance. And so there's actually going to be more nutrients in the produce in your canned items than there will be for a fresh produce item.
No, and that actually Christy Wilson, who's also another one of our awesome friends of Pacific Coast Producers, she actually said, I'm a huge advocate of canned produce. I explained that these foods are picked at the peak of flavor, nutrition, and canned within hours of harvest, which is absolutely true. And your point about different varieties being picked for different purposes. We had a peach grower earlier, Anthony Laney, talking about a clingstone peach versus a freestone peach. The same thing, exactly. They are picked at their optimum peak of ripeness, nutrients, flavor. And then that's literally sort of sealed in. So I think that's a really good point. But you brought up something that, that I think kind of leads into our next question, which is, Kristen and Kelly, I'd like us to be talking about sustainability. And The steel can is endlessly recyclable, which is super cool about the can. But the other thing that I think that we don't talk enough about is that the fruits that are canned, that are grown and canned here in the US, that's a much greener option than buying, say, for example, imported canned tomatoes that were grown overseas, put on a tanker truck, brought over, versus what Pacific Coast Producers doing. So, Kelly, I'll go ahead and start with you. How do you talk about sustainability to your audience and clients, and sort of like what's their reaction?
Yeah, so environmental conservation is incredibly important to me as, just one of my values. So something I think about personally multiple times a day. So it naturally kind of weaves into conversations, whether I'm calling it out as this is more green or sustainable or not. So I just end up recommending things that tend to be a little bit more sustainable. And that way, sometimes it's an easier conversation and, easier to change habits for people who might not feel like that's something they care about a ton. But then those that do care about it get really excited about it as well. So, there's a lot of things to consider here. There's the food waste that we already talked about. I love that the cannery panel brought up, the reduction of food waste for all canned products, but especially the steam peeled tomatoes. I worked on a project with PCP about a year ago with steam peeled in the education. And I was so excited to learn about that. And that's just an easy switch to make at the grocery store, is start to look for steam peeled versus regular canned tomatoes. Like, simple swap, doesn't take any time, right? So, that's one way. Water waste, we talked about that again with the steam peeled and everything. Packaging, carbon footprint. So learning things that behind the scenes are going on with these facilities to reduce the emissions was exciting earlier too. And that's, again, things that you can translate to your clients depending on what parts of environmental sustainability are more important to them, because there are so many different areas to focus on. But as you mentioned, it's great to support, things that are grown domestically, packaged and shipped domestically, and recognize that that's not only supporting the environment, but it also supports the US economy. So that's where we can hit people too sometimes with that kind of double whammy of, we're doing great things for the environment, for our economy, and then for our health as well.
And Kristen, I'd love your take on this as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think the endlessly recyclable aspect is huge. And I don't think a lot of people know that. I think people know they can recycle their cans, but I don't think they realize that the can will forever be recycled and none of that product gets degraded over time. And so it's really, really a sustainable packaging item. When people learn that, people are taking more of an interest into packaging of their products. I think they're more apt to buy cans. And honestly, I've seen they're more apt to recycle then too. Like, it sort of got the wheels in motion and they go, okay, now that I do have a can and now that I know this, I'm going to make sure that I recycle it. So it's promoting itself in its own way, which is kind of interesting. And then I learned so much about how they really use all of the fruit, so the fruit that's not up to the standard that would qualify it to make it, in the can, they'd use the juice or even the pits and all that the pits turn into. So that was exciting too. And I'm definitely going to be sharing that with my audience.
Oh, yeah, no, I think those are really, really interesting points. And something else that you can share if you're talking to, clients, if you're talking on social media, if they're curious about, where, if they're buying, product of US, just, look at the back of the can. If it's imported, it will say that it's product of Canada, product of Greece, product of Turkey, product of Italy. But if not, you can know, Pacific Coast Producers will often call out that it's California, but if it doesn't specify an export country of origin, you can trust that it's product of US. So that's just really important. Okay, so we have one more question, and this is actually for Libby and Ray. But one of the things that I really like about working with Pacific Coast Producers is that every year when they do this tour, it's like, what can we do better? How can we bring more? What else can we deliver? How can we really be supporting the industry? So our final question is, Ray, I'll go ahead and start with you. What do you need from Pacific Coast Producers or the canned community as a whole to just better support you in your messaging regarding canned fruits and tomatoes. You know, what can we be doing more often, differently? We're open for ideas.
Well, I'll always take more tips that I can share with people, just how to store, or, you know, to be honest, I'd really love fresh produce swaps with canned for like recipes. I think that would be really helpful because I know that I'm like missing out on so many different swaps, and also variety specific information about what varieties are grown for, you know, different cans and why. And then flavor notes, you know, what kind of flavors are in the can as well.
Ooh, I love those. I wrote them all down. I love those. No, I mean, when you mention flavor notes, it makes me think of, you know, it's like if a media person receives a bottle of wine from a winemaker, the flavor notes are there.
Well,
So
yes, or like,
that's really interesting. I love that.
Or like,
I love that. Okay, Libby, this will be, what else can you add to this? This is going to be tough. Those are really good ideas. What do you think?
Those were really great ideas. Well, from my perspective, I have the radio show on WCHE 1520 AM, and I am always looking for great information that I think my listeners will be interested in, but also that takes them to the next level or goes a little bit deeper. So one thing that I think I know would go over like gangbusters would be the story behind Pacific Coast producers, farms, and families. What is that heritage? And really bringing home that these farms are family farms and have been in the family for generations, and that the people working them really care about what they're producing for feeding America. And I guess that's probably one of the top interest stories that I can think of. Other pitches I think would be super interesting would be food safety. That's always a top issue. People are always interested in that, especially compared to maybe what's going on in other countries and how canned foods in the United States compare. And then of course, recipes, more meal prep ideas and more recipes and tips galore, all of the above.
No, those are great ideas. And I'll definitely work with Tammy Nicole and make sure that we get you what you need. And I was going to say, we have a little bit of time. I'm going to go to some questions, but Kelly or Kristen, is there anything that you want to add about other things, other resources that you would like? If anything comes to mind, feel free to add it.
You know, I loved Ray's ideas in terms of resources for the swaps, but I also think that a resource on pairing. So, you know, maybe ways to freshen it up for people who are resistant because they just say that they like the taste of fresh food better. So how can we use canned food and then maybe add an herb that's going to freshen it up a little bit? You know, what are those pairings? Or, you know, the produce that has a longer shelf life that's going to taste fresh for longer. How do we pair that with canned food to kind of stretch the time between grocery trips? So I think that all the flavors are definitely top of mind.
Love it. Okay.
I happen to agree. So I loved her idea about the flavor notes. And so it sort of naturally leads into the pairing. So I think that would be really great. And that I think will open up the idea of consumers, like just the possibility that, you know, it can taste a certain way, it can be versatile, you can use these products in a million different ways. So I think that that's brilliant.
No, I love this panel so much. I feel like we go on and on and on. So let me just see, let me just go over some of these notes. So Marina said, yes, focusing on the emotions, loves that. Sylvia Klinger, another one of our great friends, the flavor of canned fruits and veggies is just perfect because they were picked at the most optimal harvest time. Lisa Andrews, I like Libby's idea of highlighting families behind the farms. I also like the idea of how canned food reduces food insecurity, which is also, you know, another really, really big thing. And I think, you know, I don't know, Tammy, if you want to jump in, if there are any other questions that I maybe didn't see, but I think I think that's about
No,
it.
I think that we got it covered. There was just a lot of great comments on here, and a couple questions came through, but we're phoning a friend on those, and we'll answer them at the in the next session. That's a wrap with Andy. So no, it was
Oh,
just
perfect. Yeah, I
this
saw
was
one that I thought
wonderful.
would be a perfect Andy question. So, okay.
I was over here just like with happy tears. This was so wonderful.
Oh no,
great
I know,
information.
ladies, I feel like we could just talk to you all afternoon. So thank you so much.